make the task smaller. If you make the task small enough, I've never seen anyone not be able to progress if they made the task small enough. But, that can be pretty humiliating. Now, the upside is that once you take that first step, you've looked the beast in the face and you'll start progressing, not linearly, but exponentially in speed. So what's cool is that it doesn't really matter how small that first step is, because it'll start doubling, and anything that doubles grows unbelievably quickly. And so that's a very useful thing to know too. And that's true when you're learning anything new. It's like you'll feel like an imposter, you'll feel like a fool because you are, and you'll think, I'll never get there, and the destination might look very distant, but if you take a sufficiently small first step and get the ball rolling, you can be cruising along at a pretty good rate, generally faster than you'll think.
What's going on in one's psychology there? Is it building evidence of your own capabilities and capacity?
Definitely. What seems to happen when you expose people to small but challenging tasks, it does two things. It makes them more skilled because now they're actually dealing with the problem. And so they're acquiring the new perceptions and the new behaviors that are mastery. So they're actually expanding their domain of conceptual structures and actions. That's both conception and skill. But at the same time, they're seeing themselves as the actors that can change the direction of their life. For example, when you do exposure therapy with people who have phobias, agoraphobia is probably the best example. So agoraphobia is a condition where people will become so terrified, generally, of life that they often literally can't go outside their house. If they go outside their house, their anxiety levels climb to the point where they have a panic attack, which is like the complete disinhibition of the fight or flight system. Very overwhelming experience. People will go out and they'll have a panic attack, and then they'll avoid where they had the panic attack. But then the probability of the panic attack starts to spread so that wherever they go, they have a panic attack, and then they end up stuck at home. And it's quite a common condition. Now, the people who develop that are generally women, and that's because women are more sensitive to anxiety than men. They're generally women who had an over-dependent relationship with their parents, maybe particularly their father. They're generally women who went from their father to a boyfriend who was either overbearing and overprotective, or who was enticed into becoming that by the dependency of the person, of the sufferer. And then, so imagine you're a dependent young woman, you haven't learned to stand on your 2 feet. Every time you had a problem, you were taught to seek authority. You sheltered behind the protective walls that someone else had established for you. You married someone like that. Now he died, or you're getting a divorce, or so that wall is starting to come down. Okay, so all that existential panic starts to rise. You start panicking when you go out, and you end up at home unable to move. Also thinking you're the only person in the world who's suffering that way. And so what you do is you find out, you do a problem analysis, and you find out their core fears. And agoraphobics are often afraid of elevators. And that's quite convenient because, there are elevators everywhere. So you can start having them confront their fear of elevators. So how do you do that? Well, if they're really terrified, you say, well, why don't you come sit by me and let's look at some pictures of some elevators. And you say, look at the elevator. Okay, now imagine being 20 feet from it. How are you feeling? And they'll tell you. They're nervous, they're afraid they're going to get trapped in the elevator. They're afraid they'll have a heart attack. They're afraid that they'll be in there with other people who are watching them panic and have a heart attack and being humiliated. So the two big categories of fears for people are like painful death and then public humiliation. And if you have a really good anxiety fantasy, it's that you're going to undergo a painful death in a very humiliating way. And so that's what they imagine happening in the elevator. So it's not exactly that they're afraid of the elevator, right? They're afraid of death and humiliation. And the elevator is a portal to the realm of death and humiliation. It's like, I'm afraid of an elevator. Okay, how afraid? Could you look at an elevator from 100 yards down the hall? Well, like, if it isn't 100 yards, then 125 yards. Like, you'll find some threshold that the person can tolerate. Okay, so now you're at the threshold where the magnitude of their confidence is precisely matched with the size of the apparent dragon, right? So, and they feel that. It's like there's a place where their fear they'll say, that's close enough. It's like, okay, now you're on the edge. You're on the edge. So now we'll dance on the edge. We'll move you a foot forward. Okay, so let's move a foot forward. Okay. Anything negative happening? Well, I'm feeling a little nervous. Okay, well, let's just stand here for a bit. Keep your eye on the elevator. Don't hide, because you can avoid by just not looking. We do this all the time. We look away, and the bigger the dragon, the more we're likely to look away. You know, people don't like to look at, and you can understand why. People will avert their eyes from atrocity, right? And they'll certainly avert their eyes from the thought that they could participate in atrocity. And you could think of that as the heart of darkness. It isn't, because you could look at the fact that you could take glee in the commission of atrocity. And no one wants to look at that. Well, you start, and you have to look at that. You have to look at that in the final analysis. But one step at a time, you know, and you can do that with any problem, literally any problem. Break it down, break it down, break it down.
Public speaking,
anything,
going to the gym.
Anything. A small dose, you know, a small dose.